Hi everyone, Tony from Act the Movies here, and today we're going to talk about the Howling III, the Marsupials. That's right, it's my favorite werewolf movie. Followed closely by Dog Soldiers. It's Jaws, Aliens, and Predator with a werewolf twist. So I'm not going to talk about Howling 1 and 2 too much because this film is unrelated to it narrative-wise. I will just give you a brief recap. Howling 1 was directed by Joe Dante. It's a very good movie. Came out the same year as American Werewolf in London. Also has a really long, drawn-out transformation scene, which is going to come back later. I'll explain why. Not as good as American Werewolf in London's transformation scene, but still effective. I like the story more than American Werewolf in London, because that just seems more of like a remake of Wolfman. Howling did something different. I don't want to say what it is too much, but it's a very good movie. Outside of two special effects, it really holds up still, and I think you guys would like it. Now, Howling 2 was directed by Philippe Mora. It's got two titles. Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, or Howling 2, Sturba Werewolf B-Word. And it's very bad. It's barely a sequel to the first one. It's clearly a vampire script that was rewritten to feature werewolves. And the wolves that are in the movie are actually Planet of the Apes costumes that were mailed to the set instead on accident. It was meant to be more comedic, but the producers cut out the comedy and included the same shot of Sybil Danning's breast 17 times. Despite all that, Philippe Mora came back for the Howling III, the Marsupials. I love it. And I know you guys are going to say, oh, but Tony, you love Jurassic Park 3, and that one sucks. Let me tell you something, guys, all right? I didn't mention this last time, but ladies love Jurassic Park 3, okay? Right, girl in store?
Oh, I love Jurassic Park 3. And the guys that like it are total chads. If I was on a date with a guy and he put on The Lost World instead of Jurassic Park 3, I would leave and date one of his guy friends out of spite.
Well, there you have it. Howling 3 has something for everyone. Do you want to see a movie about scientists investigating werewolf sightings in the outback under orders of the American president, who's played by an Australian man, and really getting into the biology of how werewolves work and what causes them and how they interact with different things and their biology and their metabolism? Then Howling 3 is for you. Do you want to see a movie about a young girl from a small town who dreams of finding life somewhere else and then eventually falls in love and finds happiness in the big city? Then Howling 3 is for you. Do you want to see a film about a Russian ballerina werewolf who flees Moscow to go to Australia so she could be part of this prophecy where a werewolf will breed with a were-marsupial and cause a new breed of werewolves to emerge? Then Howling 3 is for you. Do you want to see a movie where military and hunters go into the outback to murder werewolves, and then werewolves call upon their were-marsupial wolf god, and then turn into a giant werewolf King Kong monster who gets blown up with a grenade launcher? Then Howling 3 is for you. Everything I just said is true. This is all in the movie. This movie is very loaded. It feels like a bunch of films in like a blender. The best way I can describe it is it feels like a dream. You know, you ever have a dream where it's like following this like one path and suddenly your dream like veers off and you start dreaming about something completely different and then you circle back to the main dream? That's what this movie feels like. Because each little subplot in this film could have been its own movie. The Russian ballerina, the scientist, the girl finding life in the big city, it could have all been its own thing. But yeah, this movie just really goes in so many directions you don't expect. And there's weird moments in it. There's a moment where the president and the scientist break the fourth wall.
Why are we being filmed, Mr. President?
Don't let it bother you, Beckmeyer. We are recording everything here for future generations.
And then the wide shot, there's no camera crew. And it never comes up again. There's a weird priest that's just way too nosy and talks like he's like an evil guy.
You should not run away from home.
I don't like home.
Why, child?
Because my stepfather tried to rape me and he's a werewolf.
So all these little strange things up until the end when it turns out you can summon a were-marsupial wolf god into your body and become that were-marsupial wolf god. It's got probably the best death scene you'll ever see.
You'll turn into a river, Kendi, and then a rainbow, and then you'll be a mountain.
No way. I'm just gonna die.
And most of all, it's funny. Like, the guy who finds Jerboa, Donnie, he works for a film called Shapeshifters Part 8, which is really making fun of how in the 80s, because this is 1987, it was making fun of how horror franchises just kept going and going and going. And this movie knows it's the third in the series, so it's not trying to... I mean, it doesn't continue the story from the other two films, but it knows it's part of a franchise. And the film that they're making in the movie is ridiculous. They go to watch another werewolf movie called It Came From Uranus. And it's got this long, drawn-out werewolf scene, which was making fun of other movies that had long, drawn-out werewolf scenes, like the first Howling. So I think little stuff like that, like the fact that it will acknowledge how ridiculous it is what keeps me going through this film. Because, like, again, it's story-wise, it's very loaded. This movie feels very long. I don't think it's that very long, but it feels very... It's only 94 minutes. But this feels like an epic. If you're wondering if this movie has a scene where a lady gives birth to a were-marsupial and then the were-marsupial crawls up her belly into a pouch, it does. It has that scene. If you think this movie has a scene where 3 were-marsupial nuns go on like a Terminator mission and they attack everyone at a Halloween party and kill everyone in the hospital, it does. If you could think about it, this movie has it. Toward the end, all characters kind of merge. The Jerboa gets forced back to the tribe with her weird incest father. He ends up mating with the Russian ballerina werewolf who escapes to the tribe. The scientist becomes sympathetic to the werewolves and escape to the tribe. And they all escape together after the government's taken in the rest because the government decides that werewolves are evil and they need to be exterminated. So this is when the movie kind of feels like the return to the king of werewolf movies. Because then they go in the woods and you think, all right, that's it. They're going to live happily ever after. But no, the military comes. So then they summon the wolf gods, 2 of them. And they attack the military and the hunters and it ends in that big explosion. And you think that's the end. But no, it shows the characters living in the outback for a couple years. And you're like, oh, well, they're going to live in secret and have a happy life. And you think that's the end, but no. Because then they show that Donnie and Jerboa want to go back into the real world with new identity so they don't get caught and get back into the movies. And the scientist tells them that's a bad idea, but then they leave. And then you think that's the end. But no! Flash forward 15 years later, this scientist and the Russian ballerina are now hooked up. Now they have a kid. And his scientist friend finds him and says, hey man, it got bad for a bit. The world turned against werewolves. There were mass executions. There was like a werewolf war. But then one day the Pope said, werewolves are cool, we should be nice to them. And then the president agreed. I don't think it was the president from earlier in the movie because he hated werewolves and he hated gay werewolves.
I think he fell in love with the Russian werewolf.
Was it female?
Yes.
Well, thank Christ for that.
So then you think the movie's done, but no, they show that he goes back to America, becomes a teacher, and he meets the grown-up version of the little were-marsupial baby from earlier in the movie. And they're like, oh, they have this big reunion. And then it keeps going where you find out Jerboa and Donnie have new names. They're big Hollywood stars. And the movie finally ends when Jerboa gets her Academy Award or something from a guy in drag and turns into a werewolf on TV. I guess no one knew she was a werewolf, even though werewolves are like considered cool now. So yeah, that's all like in the last 10 minutes. That could have been 15 movies, I feel. But they shove it at the very end. This movie's great. I don't care what anyone says. I feel like a lot of people write it off because the title is called The Marsupials, and they think they're her werewolf kangaroos. It's not. They're closer to the Tasmanian tiger, which was extinct, which comes up in the movie. Yeah. I love this film, and I think you will too. If you go into this movie, check your brain at the door, realize that it's having fun and not taking itself too seriously. You're going to need that for the effects, because the effects aren't great in this, but it kind of works with the movie's wacky comedic nature. And yeah, just keep in mind that you'll never see this in another werewolf movie. Or any other monster movie. This many storylines about these many topics over this course of time. Like, I don't know. Most werewolf movies are just a guy getting bitten and wanting to eat people. So, I don't know. Check it out. Check out the Howling series in general. Because I think it's the most creative werewolf franchise ever. Maybe not the best, but the most creative. And yeah, maybe one day I'll come back. I'll talk about the first two. And then I'll talk about how 4, 5, and 6 are completely unrelated, but then a crazy guy made 7 and tried to tie them all together. Or maybe I'll talk about the weird Twilight reboot they did. But yeah, if you watch one Howling movie, watch this one. It's streaming on Prime right now. I think you're going to have a good time. And hopefully you feel the way I do, that this will now become your favorite werewolf movie. Or maybe I'm just an idiot. Who knows? But what I do know is I have a Halloween commentary track up now on my Patreon. So please remember to pledge to my Patreon. And if you can't do that, why not buy a shirt? Why not buy this shirt? It's pretty cool.